my name is Todd Bennett from Shema, YisraelTours.com, and we're here in the land of Israel for our Passover 2017 tour. Today we're at the location known as Masada, and we're above the Jordan Valley Dead Sea region. Now this is very interesting because this site reminds us of not only Passover but also judgment. You see, when Abraham was visited by Yod-Heh, Vav-Heh and the two angels, he was given a promise. He was told that this time next year at the Moad, the appointed time, that the promise that was given to him for a son would be fulfilled. Now prior to that point, Abram and Lot, his nephew, had gained so many herds and flocks and so much wealth that they needed to separate. And Abram at that time was between Bethel and Ai. And he told Lot, you choose. You choose where you would like to go. If you go east, I'll go west. If you go west, I'll go east. But we don't want our herdsmen to be arguing. We're family. We want to always get along. We don't want any contention between us. So Lot looked up and he saw the lush Jordan River Valley, and he went to the east. And then it says he traveled as far down as the Sodom region. So here we're looking at Sodom and Gomorrah, and up north are Admah and Zeboim. So these were four areas that eventually ended up being judged. And we know that Lot was down here somewhere. And we're looking at the devastation of judgment that ultimately took place because the people in this region were considered to be evil. The reason we connect this place with Passover is because when the angels went to Lot and tried to remove him from the city that he was in, he had served them a feast, it says in the scriptures, and he provided them with unleavened bread. And of course we connect that with the Passover and unleavened bread. And there's strong tradition, in fact, that Isaac was born the next year at the time of Passover. So we see a Passover event and then judgment occurring upon the people in this region. And that's interesting because we're standing on top of Masada, which looks down upon this area where judgment rained down. And this is a reminder of judgment. And then when we look at what happened on here, many years later, centuries later, we see judgment of Yah also being rendered upon a people. Now after the judgment that occurred at this place, we know that Lot had two children by his two daughters, Moab and Ammon, and those were the patriarchs of the Ammonites and the Moabites. And probably one of the most famous Moabite that lived was Ruth, and from Ruth came King David and eventually the Messiah Yeshua. Now during the time of Yeshua, he also told of judgment that would come down upon Jerusalem and the house of Judah because they did not receive him, they did not recognize him, they did not exalt him as their king. He indicated that judgment would befall Jerusalem and the people. And he gave his followers a clear warning. He said in Luke 21:20, "But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation has come near." Verse 21, "Then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains, and let those who are inside the city depart, and let not those who are out of the country enter it." And verse 22, "For these are the days of vengeance to fulfill all that is written." So Yeshua provided his disciples, his followers, with some warning signs, and he told them to flee. And of course we know from history that when the Roman army did come down and surround Jerusalem, that his disciples did flee. In fact, they fled to the mountains of Perea, which are across the Jordan River into the region that's now the country of Jordan, and they ended up in Pella, many of them did. So they followed his instructions, they heeded his warning, and they were delivered when Jerusalem and the house of Judah was judged. Now the people here on Masada, they were the zealots. They were trying to take on Rome force with force. And they did not follow Yeshua, they did not accept him as the Messiah, and they did not heed his instructions. As a result, they fled up on top of Herod's palace, so they actually came to a place built by the Romans, a Roman fortress, and they relied upon Roman defenses to defend them instead of relying on the warnings given by Yeshua the Messiah. And the result was tragic. The people up here, after they lived here for many, many years, the Romans surrounded them and ended up building a siege ramp, and ultimately they prevailed. And the people up here, instead of becoming slaves to the Romans, they ended up committing suicide. A tragic end, but nevertheless, it was the judgment of Elohim that was fulfilled upon a people that rejected his son, Yeshua the Messiah. So this is a clear warning that we need to heed the words of Elohim and follow his instructions, and he will deliver his people from judgment. But we need to listen to him and diligently obey him. And of course, that brings us back to the Passover time. We started by talking about Passover and the judgment on Sodom and Gomorrah and Admah and Zeboim. And we're here right before Passover. And of course, we think about the Passover and the deliverance from Egypt. And again, it involved diligently following the instructions of Elohim that were given through his servant Moses. While Egypt, the major power of the time, was being judged, the people of Elohim were separated, and they did not fall under the judgments, under the wrath of Elohim. So as he was judging the nation of Egypt, his people were being protected, separated, and ultimately delivered from that. So as we consider this time of Passover, we need to consider about obedience, obeying him diligently and listening to his words. And that makes us think of the calendar. So many people are not observing the calendar at the proper time. They're following the Jewish calendar, which is actually a calendar that was developed by the Pharisees. The Pharisees did not follow Yeshua, and ultimately they created the religion of Judaism, and they created the calendar of Judaism, which doesn't follow the commandments of Elohim provided in Genesis 1:14 by utilizing the sun and the moon to determine the times. Rather, they use a calculation created by men. So if they were off during the year that Moshe delivered the Israelites from Egypt, the firstborn of Israel would have been killed along with the Egyptians. Timing was critical, and it was very important that they observed the Passover at the correct time back then. Just like them, it's important for us to get these times right, to diligently obey the commandments so that we don't fall under the judgment of Elohim, but rather we are delivered, separated, and protected by him. So that's all for now from this site. But we have many more teachings, and this is what we do at ShemaYisrael@Torahs.com. We bring it to the original sites. We put things in perspective with the scriptures, and through that you get the truth and a better understanding of the scriptures and how to walk according to the commandments of Elohim. So until next time, shalom.